I do want to touch on the process for those who don't know in terms of the men and women picking the teams. Top 15, you are into the Olympic competition, max 4 per country. And then after the top 15, you go 2 players, max 2 players each country to fill the field, 60 men, 60 women. That's the process that it's been now in these 3 Olympics. Going back, what was the reasoning behind using the OWGR? Was this mirroring any other perhaps sport? Because there are, take a sport like basketball, that is a more of a hand-picked selection by the federation. So how did you determine what to do here?
Yeah, we thought 2 things. First thing is that we want the athlete themselves to earn the honor to represent their country, and also to ensure that we have the best athletes participate at the games. Now, that said, we also want to balance that with diversity. So it's strength of field versus diversity of nationality. And then to do that, what's the fairest way? And frankly, right now, there's no better system than the official World Golf Rankings. And similar to the rankings themselves, where points reduced over a 2-year period, we started a 2-year period out from when actually last week. So as to 2 years ago, back in June, in 2022 was when the ranking started. And so, more points you get later, more obviously they count towards the rankings. And that's what we're seeing leading into this week's final results. So we thought, top 15, the IOC normally has a rule within the Olympic Charter which says maximum number of participants per country is 3. Tennis had an exception by being allowed to have 4, and so we used that precedence and said, well, there's a number of countries such as America on the men's side, Korea on the women's side, etc., and Japan as well, and the US also on the women's side, that if we don't want all of them there, but also if we reduce it down to that, we're going to reduce the strength of field. So we saw the success of tennis with the 4 participants per country, and the IOC agreed to that. So by having that maximum within the top 15 and then opening it up to a maximum of 2 per country after that until we fill the field of 60, we end up with a really strong field. And on the women's side, I think we'll have 18 of the top 20, and the other 2 aren't there because they're maxed out on the nationalities. So everybody that can be there that's qualified, that is selected by the National Olympic Committee, because that's the other issue. It's the National Olympic Committee that ultimately selects the team that participates at the Olympic Games. And some NOCs may select a different criteria to our minimum criteria, but that's their right. So we get to that with the strength of field, a diversity that we have, and we end up getting some very good medalists. And if you recall from Tokyo, a playoff for bronze. So we're playing off for the medals. And we had a 7-player playoff.
6-person playoff. Yeah,
it was 7. And
7.
Yep. So we're unlike once there's a bit of distance of time between who wins a major, we don't seem to remember who came 2nd or 3rd. But with these pieces of metal around their neck, we do remember who comes 2nd or 3rd.
I think we remember that playoff. Hideki Matsuyama obviously being local. You had Rory McIlroy, you had Colin Morikawa, and CT Pan came out of that playoff. So that was certainly a memorable moment that was created. Now, I know when you defined this criteria back for the 2016 Olympics, you weren't expected to deal with some of the things that we have had to deal with in golf over the last few years. It so happens that we're talking right after the U.S. Open. There are people out there clamoring for Bryson DeChambeau, including himself, to have an Olympic spot. He actually moved all the way up to 10th in the OWGR, which is 6th in terms of the U.S. Federation, but he won't, as of now, unless 2 Americans choose not to go. He, as of right now, will not be going to the Olympics. Some of the things that have gone on in golf, has that made you rethink this format going forward?
Well, we'll see. Unfortunately, when all this has happened since the 2-year period when we started the ranking system, so and we can't start. Once we're committed to that, and the IOC agrees to it, we hold course. So that's what we've done. Now, obviously, you've got to look at this and say, okay, well, can we have a better field? And maybe, based upon the criteria we have, we'll review it, and we'll see with the IOC if it sits with them that they're happy if we were to do that. But certainly, everything after these games is reviewed. The competition format, the qualification system, etc. I feel for Bryson a lot because he qualified for Tokyo, and unfortunately he failed the COVID test, so he was a late withdrawal, and that gave the opportunity for Captain America to jump straight on a plane and fly over. Once he walked off the golf course, which I think it was a memorial tournament,
I believe Patrick Reed you're talking about, played on a PGA Tour event, flew over to Japan, played in the Olympics for the second time, and then flew immediately back to the U.S. So he was racking up those miles in 2021.
Well, one of the most unknown asides to that, by the time he got to the venue was the Wednesday. It was in the evening of the Wednesday before competition started, and he was at outside the venue. And as you can attest, there's strong security at the Olympic Games, and you need a piece of plastic called accreditation or credential to show that you can go in. And he was halted at the accreditation office. So after walking through that, I think it was around 7:30 at night. He and his coach, who came as his caddy, the only opportunity they had to see the course was to jump into a golf buggy and drive around it, and did not complain once, and was excited about being there. So that showed his commitment, and I think it also shows the commitment of all the other athletes that end up participating there.
So to be clear, that was Patrick Reed showing up the Wednesday night before the competition. The 3M Open in Minnesota was the week before, and then the WGC FedEx St. Jude Invitational in Memphis, Tennessee was the week after. So those were that was the classic Minneapolis to Tokyo to Memphis route that so many people take. That's an interesting story that we uncover about the 2021